You're listening to Colorado Chamber Office Hours, a podcast that explores what matters most to business. I'm your host, Ed Sealover, Vice President of Strategic Initiatives for the Colorado Chamber of Commerce and editor of the Sum and Substance. Let's get talking. Welcome to Colorado Chamber Office Hours. I'm your host, Ed Sealover, and today I'm sitting down with someone who will have a lot of impact on the new bills that employers will see over the next few months regarding everything from operational regulations to tax breaks to healthcare changes that will affect organizations that provide insurance. And that person is Julie McCluskie, who is entering her fourth session as the Speaker of the Colorado House of Representatives. Speaker McCluskie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Ed.
Well, now I'm going to try to cram into the next 10 minutes a whole lot of topics that we could probably talk about for more than an hour. But I want to kind of start at the high level with you here, Speaker McCluskie. What are the broad areas on which your caucus, and by the way, that's the caucus that holds 43 of the 65 seats in the state house, for those who don't know that, what's going to focus on during the 2026 session?
Well, I'll tell you, Ed, over my last 7 years in office, Democrats have been focused on the affordability challenges that working families are facing in this state, whether that's housing, healthcare, childcare, the cost of groceries, or fuel costs. We will continue our march to try and make our state affordable for the folks that want to love and live the great Colorado dream. Additionally, I think, Coloradans from where I live on the Western Slope and those down here in urban areas care deeply about our great state and our natural resources. So continuing to focus on how we protect water, particularly the Colorado River, our focus on how we make our economy strong, make sure everybody can find a job that pays a living wage, and take care of our kids. My own personal passion policy around public education, higher education, working to be sure that children in this state have a great shot at building their skills, their talent, their knowledge for the career of their dreams. I think that's what Colorado is all about.
Well, I think you've hit a lot of the topics I wanted to zero in on. Let's start by the first one you mentioned here, and that is the idea of bringing down the cost of living. I think this is actually, from a high level, a policy that you and your Republican colleagues agree on pretty well. However, as we've seen in past sessions, sometimes it comes down to the details of how do we bring down the cost of living. So tell me, in your mind, does bringing down the cost of living involve limiting regulations on business, limiting what businesses can charge customers, a little of both, other things?
I said a lot during this last session that it is important we be both pro-worker and pro-business. And being both means that everybody wins, right? We've got to have smart regulation on business that doesn't, tie the hands of business leaders when it comes to making good economic decisions and expanding workforce opportunities. We've also got to be investing in our workforce and make sure that we are developing a workforce that has the talent and skills for the jobs that we are craving in this state, particularly when it comes to our thriving tech community. So I believe that this legislature has been invested in ensuring that our small businesses get the tax breaks they should, that we support workers in every environment, and I believe that our legislature will continue on that path.
Let's talk about investing in workers, because that's also an idea that I think both sides, and we're going to go for all the favorites from both sides here first, that both sides would agree with.
I love it.
At this point, you've run some significant bills over the last 2 years to add to the workforce system, to put out some tax credits, to start the regional talent development summits.
Yes.
What more can be done at this point in terms of workforce development investments?
Well, Ed, I'm really excited about probably my biggest policy this next year, and that is reimagining what our workforce supports could look like at the state level. Right now, we have got a Department of Higher Education that helps to support and serve our institutions of higher ed, colleges, universities, but we've also got apprenticeship programs and work-based learning opportunities. We've got a Department of Labor and Employment that helps support those who are unemployed with unemployment benefits. Our Department of Education provides adult learning, assistance in getting a high school diploma, for example. I would love to see us bring all of those different programs, services, and supports under one roof and create an agency in this state that's focused on workforce and talent development in a way that is Colorado specific, that really focuses on the needs that we have in this state based on the economies that we depend on, whether that's tourism, agriculture, our outdoor recreation economy, as we talked about, technology. No matter where we see industry move and grow, we need to be nimble and flexible enough to create a workforce that's ready for those challenges. And I'm excited to be bringing that initiative in partnership with our Govs team.
Now, I think for those of us that watch state government closely, we can understand a little bit of what consolidation into a single agency of some of these departments you're talking about would mean. But I think the average business owner might say, wait, how does that help me? I mean, so how could this actually benefit employers?
Yeah, excellent question, Ed. And to be honest, it's leaders in the chamber, business leaders in the state, who feel that we have too many disconnected approaches to how we are facilitating that workforce development. You know, you talked about the regional talent opportunity now grant programs, the regional approach we took with some of our ARPA dollars to foster more college university partnership with businesses in specific areas of the state where, you know, there might be a unique job or industry that is lacking the right expertise in their workforce. That kind of regional hub and development, I think, is critical, and we need to do that at the state level. We need to be thinking kind of cross-pollination between apprenticeship programs and higher education, and how do we help a worker in this state open one door, have one place to go to get the support or the guidance for wherever they want to land in their career or whatever skill set they want to build.
Okay, we'll be eager to see how that plays out. You mentioned the idea of giving tax breaks to the right employers, and certainly we've seen that investing in things like employer-owned businesses, things like that. I will say that we also saw that in the last special session, you needed to close a pretty significant budget gap, and part of that strategy was rolling back some of the tax breaks that are out there, about $153 million over 5 bills. I'm kind of curious now, two things. One, are we going to need to talk about rolling back more tax breaks again this session, considering you're again facing a roughly $800 billion budget shortfall? And secondly, how do you look at that balance between funding state government where it needs to be funded and making sure you're not doing harm to businesses financially?
Ed, I'm going to start by saying I think it's an $800 to $900 million shortfall, not $800 billion. If it was $800 billion, I think we'd all be packing up.
It just grows larger every day.
It feels that way for sure. Ed, you are hitting on the biggest challenge we face as a state, and that is our budget. We have long been challenged with the Tabor spending cap, which restricts our ability to increase revenue in this state. And I would offer the cap is not based on the right metrics for Colorado to grow in a healthy way, for Colorado to provide the services and programs that so many Coloradans demand. But now in this moment, we are really challenged to consider how do we drive more dollars to the priorities that we hear about from Coloradans. I will say first and foremost, our Medicaid budget is exploding. We have an older, grayer Colorado, folks on Medicaid who are putting greater pressure on our budget because of need for long-term care services, nursing home services. And we provide public education in this state. That service, that program has long been underfunded and is, between Medicaid and public education, the bulk of the state's budget. So as we look at how we preserve revenue, how we think about cutting back on unnecessary expenses, we also have to look at tax breaks. We have to be very thoughtful about maintaining the right environment for economic growth, for businesses to thrive and be able to deliver great products and continue to achieve their objectives, and be sure that the state is very targeted and strategic with those tax breaks in a way that also protects what our core and primary purpose is around Medicaid and public education and the myriad of other government services we provide.
Well, we've talked a little bit about the direct cost to businesses. Let me ask you a little bit about the indirect cost to businesses. And this is the regulations that businesses face. And I'm sure you heard this stat a million times during the last session, but we at the Colorado Chamber did a study, found out Colorado is the sixth most regulated state in America. The more regulations add up, the less jobs businesses create. Nobody wants to cut the core public health and safety regulations. Everyone wants doctors to be licensed, say.
Yes.
But how is there an appetite in your caucus to talk about the whole panoply of regulations, of whether or not the state has gone too far in areas where the state should re-examine it, or is that an area that there isn't an appetite to discuss? I'm curious how you approach regulations in general.
Yeah, Ed, I think I want to frame this in a slightly different way. Regulations don't come about just because we want to regulate business, right? They come about because there is this very specific ask or need from our public. You just identified a great one, right? We want our doctors to be licensed. We want to be sure that our doctors are qualified and educated and have the skills to be able to deliver medicine in a way that protects lives. A lot of the regulations that have come forward, at least in my time in office, and I'm sure before, were driven by specific asks from our public, from consumers, or because there had been a health or a safety issue, right? I do think it is important we evaluate and assess those regulations. And that is not something that we have done systematically or with at least the legislature has not done so except through the sunset review process. And you're probably familiar with that. It's an annual, every year there are a number of regulations that are reviewed through DORA, one of our state agencies. And I do think it's time that we think more intentionally about evaluating maybe duplicate regulations that no longer serve a purpose because of the advancement of technology or other circumstances. And I've really welcomed and appreciated the voices from business leaders from the chamber who have said, stop, the regulation is killing us. Okay. Let's think about what that regulation is, though. Let's not just talk about it in terms of numbers in the number of regulations, but really let's talk about what the purpose is of those regulations, and can we evaluate and, if necessary, get rid of some of them?
That's a great segue here. Let's talk about two in particular that I want to bring up. One is artificial intelligence regulations. I mean, there's been a lot of talk the last two regular sessions and a special session about it, but what we've come to so far is just pushing off the go date for the country's most comprehensive AI regulations until June of 2026. We're now at that point where something has to be done. I won't ask you to tell me what's going to be in a final bill, but how are you looking at that? What needs to be included in any final AI regulations to balance out consumer and business protections?
I really want to commend the legislators in the House and the Senate who have spent countless hours trying to better understand the world of AI. I think, most of us out there, we recognize an AI video on social media, or we use ChatGPT to help write a letter. But I don't know that all of us realize how deep the AI tentacles are in almost every facet of our lives now. And I think what we have primarily been focused on is making sure that any AI technology, that there is an awareness, our public is aware when AI technology is in use, so disclosures, and then liability, understanding that if decisions are made with AI tools and those decisions are either biased or cause harm, that there is a pathway for a person to be made whole. And that's challenging. I watched through our special session legislators and tech leaders, business leaders come together and talk about these very complex issues in a way that was certainly with the the average Coloradan in mind, trying to do what's right by our public, and at the same time allow for our thriving technology sector to grow. I am hopeful. There's a group hard at work now talking about different policy pathways, and I'm very hopeful that we'll see something come to fruition in January.
Okay, I'm going to put you down in the category of we can get this done.
You bet. An optimist at heart.
I want to toss one more at you here. This is one we've heard a lot from our members, and it was a bill that came up in 2025, and that was the idea of regulating businesses whose workers work in extreme temperatures. And as you represent, and I don't know that all the listeners know this, a mountain district, that's going to be a lot of workers in your areas. There was a lot of opposition to this in the way it was presented. I'm curious your thoughts, and maybe this even extends beyond this one bill, but the idea of how much does the state government need to get involved to protect workers like that? Does it need to do something specifically when temperatures grow too hot? And how do you view the idea of what the legislature's role is in getting in between the worker and the employer to offer workers protections?
Yeah, you're right. There was a bill that had initially come forward last year, and I think wisely our bill sponsors recognized quickly they needed to talk and spend more time with the many stakeholders, the many both business and industry and community groups and just general public, people who wanted to share their stories or have some contribution to what that policy might look like. So they took a step back and they said, you know what, we need to do more stakeholding. We need to spend more time understanding what industry is already doing, what businesses are already providing. I think that, again, there is a way we can be pro-worker and pro-business and make sure that the safety, the health of every worker is protected. And really, when we talk about extreme heat or cold conditions, we're talking about health and safety. I have not seen any policy at this point, Ed. I hope that if something is coming forward, that those groups have been engaged and had the opportunity to contribute to what the policy ultimately looks like. Again, with the idea that we need to be thinking about both the health and safety of the worker and what a business can and cannot do. As a quick example, I live in ski country. I represent 8 of the most fabulous ski resorts, not just in Colorado, but in the entire world. And there are some days when, I might decide not to go skiing because it's 10 below zero, but there will be skiers, die-hard enthusiasts who will strap on their boards and get up on the mountain. That could be rough for somebody who's working a chairlift all day, right? And I trust that our ski resorts are taking the steps necessary to ensure the safety and health of their workers. But I think it's certainly a noble pursuit for our legislators to want that health and safety protection for every worker in every extreme temp environment.
Thank you. And lastly, and I'll say quickly, but I know this isn't quite a quick topic, you've spent the last 3 sessions talking a lot about how to increase affordable housing in this state. Where are we now? Are we at the point where the legislature steps back and decides, hey, can we see what we've done? Can we see how it plays out? Or do we need to do more in 2026 to boost affordable housing?
Yeah, it's such a good question, Ed. I will say that we're finally seeing sticks in the ground with some of the investments we made back in 2020 with ARPA dollars that came in from the federal government. We've put in over $500 million in grant programming, trying to reduce barriers to development, trying to drive inventory through revolving loan programs, helping first-time buyers get into the marketplace. I am very confident that we have made a lot of good policy progress on the affordable housing front. I see it across my district where new housing projects are coming on board online, some finally getting completed, and we're seeing people moving in. But we still have a ways to go. And I don't know if the state has done all that it can at this point. Last year we brought forward one particular housing effort that didn't succeed. It was about partnering with some of our religious communities, school communities in development. I think we might see that come back this year. But we have had several housing bills take a year or two to get through, and always with, that work to find the right policy, compromise with local community leadership, just to be sure that people can afford where they live in this great state. And I'm proud of our progress. I think we're starting to see the fruits of that, and I hope that whatever comes this year just adds to that, that momentum to be sure people can afford where they live.
We'll be watching for that one, too. Colorado House Speaker Julie McCluskie, thank you for this thoughtful and informative conversation. And, of course, we wish you the best of luck over the next 4 months with everything that comes before you.
Ed, it's always a joy to meet with you. And Chamber Office Hours, I love the name of the podcast. It's a keeper.
All right, we'll put that on our tagline. It's a keeper. Thank you all for listening. That's it for our interview segment. Now let's take a quick look at what you need to know about the week ahead. Well, folks, we have finally reached the exciting portion of the legislative session where committees will start hearing bills this week. I won't lie, there's not going to be a ton that's going to grab business attention early on, as many of the issues of employer concern, including the first hearing for the bill to overturn the Colorado Labor Peace Act, are scheduled for next week. But there's a few things you may want to know about. On Wednesday at 1:30, the House Judiciary Committee will be taking up the first of what is expected to be numerous bills offered this year on regulating social media and online activities. House Bill 1058 would require online content creators who are featuring minors in revenue-generating content to set aside a portion of the earnings for those minors. And it also permits adults who were featured as minors previously in such content to request the content be deleted or that their image be removed. This bill would permit civil actions to be filed on the part of those minors, so it will be worth watching. Then on Thursday at 1:30, the Senate Local Government Transportation and Housing Committee takes up the first of an expected slew of affordable housing bills this year, and the only one so far that has bipartisan sponsorship. Senate Bill 1 would allow county commissioners to appropriate general fund money for multi-jurisdictional housing authorities, which is something that, yes, they are prohibited from doing right now. So essentially, this bill would remove a barrier to local governments working together to build more affordable housing, and if that sounds bipartisan, well, that's why it has bipartisan backing. Finally, on Friday at 1 p.m., the joint House and Senate Energy Committees will host a panel to discuss the recent Xcel Energy power shutoffs due to public safety reasons. Xcel and other utilities have said such shutoffs are necessary during high wind conditions to avoid power lines breaking and starting fires by sparking during dry conditions, such as we saw 5 years ago during the Marshall Fire. But residents and businesses have complained these shutoffs are very disruptive and at times expensive for them. And this hearing may serve as an indicator of whether legislators will seek to offer a bill this session to limit such shutoffs. Finally, I want to let you know this is a special week as we will be airing a second episode beginning on Thursday that will represent our final session preview conversation with a legislative leader. In this case, the conversation is with Senate Minority Leader Cleve Simpson. After that, next week, we'll begin focusing on some of the biggest bills that will be coming up in the following week, with interviews with proponents and opponents where we can. So please stay tuned for some timely news, and thanks for tuning in. That's all for this episode of Colorado Chamber Office Hours. Once again, I'm Ed Seelover, Vice President of Strategic Initiatives for the Colorado Chamber of Commerce and editor of the Sum and Substance. I'll keep the conversation going at tsscolorado.com, and we'll see you next time as we explore the issues that matter most to business.